this is Jason Yu. We're reading Who Was Nikola Tesla, Chapter 7 to Chapter 9. I hope you like it. Thank you for subscribing and liking. I hope you do it. Thank you for listening for my introduction. This is Chapter 7. War of Currents. In 1890, the Westinghouse Corporation was in trouble. It was losing money. To help his friend George Westinghouse, Nikola did something remarkable. He tore up the royalty clause in his contract. That meant he would never earn more money from Westinghouse. Nikola didn't mind. He was more interested in his inventions, helping people get electricity, than in making some more money. Nikola's partnership with Westinghouse was a big problem for Thomas Edison. At that time, very few homes in the U.S. had electricity. The average city might have had street lamps, but people in the countryside wouldn't have even seen them yet. Electrical lines had not yet been set up. There was no way to carry electricity over great distances from the generators. But it was clear that whatever company could find a way to bring electricity to homes in the U.S. was going to make a lot of money. Nikola and Westinghouse believed alternating currents was the best method. It could travel great distances at high voltage from a large power plant, then be transformed to a lower, safer voltage for homes. Since direct currents couldn't be transformed, it could only travel short distances at a safe voltage. Direct current would require a small power plant to be built every mile or so. Thomas Edison had already started building those power plants. His first DC power station had opened in New York City in 1882. He knew if AC became standard, he would lose a lot of money on the DC stations. So he tried to convince the public that using AC, Tesla's big idea, was a bad and dangerous thing. He worked hard to spread the lie. Edison distributed thousands of pamphlets that said alternating currents was deadly and horribly. He teamed up with an electrical engineer to electrocute stray dogs with alternating current. And it worked. Investors and public officials became scared of the AC technology. Nikola knew that any electricity, alternating currents, or direct current could be dangerous. How could he and Westinghouse prove AC was just as safe as DC? In 1891, the year Nikola became a citizen of the United States, he gave another lecture before the American Institute of Electrical Engineers on alternating current. The next year, he gave talks in London and Paris. While in Paris in 1892, Nikola received a telegram from his uncle Peter, saying that his mother was sick. I made the long journey home without an hour of rest, Nikola said. His mother died several weeks later on April 4th. Back in the US, George Westinghouse II scored a huge victory by winning the contract to power the world's Columbian Exposition in Chicago in 1893. Westinghouse got the job because he offered to provide the electricity for less money than Edison did. The first all-electric fair in history was the best chance to show the world that AC was safe and effective. More than 200,000 light bulbs showcased the power of alternating currents at the Columbian Exposition, the Great Hall of Electricity. Nikola wowed onlookers with demonstrations like the ones he had given in New York City laboratory. By the end of the 6-month exposition, Westinghouse had won over the public. Visitors to the fair could see for themselves how safe and useful the AC lights were. AC current soon became the standard technology for delivering electricity to consumers in the US. But winning over the public was only part of the battle in the war of AC versus DC. Actually, getting electricity into people's homes would be the most difficult part. Nikola looked to Niagara Falls for answer. Ever since Nikola read about Niagara Falls as a boy, he had been intrigued by hydroelectricity, the force of falling or flowing water to produce water. The rushing force of the fast-moving water turns a wheel called a turbine. The spinning turbine turns a metal shaft in the motor that generates electricity. Other scientists and engineers long had talked about using the power of Niagara Falls to create electrical energy. However, nothing had ever come of it. The success of AC technology at the World's Columbian Exposition convinced state officials in New York that it just might work. Before the exposition was over, they had awarded Westinghouse Corporation a contract to build turbines and generators for Niagara Falls using Nikola's patents and alternating current technology. The first generator was tested in April 1895. The next year, the world's first large-scale hydroelectric power plant officially opened. It immediately began delivering electric power to Buffalo, New York, around 20 miles away. Within just a few years, the range extended all the way to New York City, a distance of over 400 miles. Chapter 8: Wireless Dreams. Now the East Coast had light, and Nikola had helped open the door to the availability of electrical power for human throughout the U.S. By 1925, half of all Americans could be living in the modern age of electricity. Long before then, however, Nikola turned his attention to his next goal: wireless communication. The telephone had been invented by Alexander Graham Bell in 1876, but it needed wires, of course. And even before Nikola was born, people had been able to communicate long distances by sending signals over a wire. A machine at one end would send an electrical current to a receiver at the other end. The receiver could take the series of short taps called dots and longer taps, dashes, and use a code to translate them into words. This machine was a telegraph, and the code was the Morse code. It was named for American Samuel F.B. Morse, an inventor of the telegraph. But what about the places where there were no wires? What if a ship in the middle of the ocean needed help and wanted to signal ashore? Nikola knew that the air is filled with invisible electromagnetic waves called radio waves. Instead of using wires to carry those signals of dots and dashes, Nikola pictured using radio waves to carry them. In 1895, just a steady 9-year-old Nikola was preparing to transmit a signal by radio waves from a distance of 50 miles. Glumiro Macaroni sent and received his first signals without wires, and was awarded a patent for radio technology. Nikola had been so close to perfecting his transmissions, but a fire had ruined his New York laboratory. Nikola had been giving lectures about using radio waves to send messages and sound since the early 1890s. He demonstrated a remote-controlled boat using radio waves in New York in 1889. The people who watched it were amazed. Nikola had to take the boat apart to show there were no tricks hidden inside. Nikola talked about a wireless world in which we shall be able to communicate with each other instantly, irrespective of distance. And the device, a man will be able to carry one of his vest pocket. How right Nikola was. that sounds like a modern cell phone. Nikola had missed his chance to be the first to send a wireless signal a long distance. But why stop at sending a small amount of information, such as the message Macaroni sent? Why not use those waves to send large amounts of information? Information such as pictures, music, and voices that sounds a lot like the internet. As usual, Nikola's ideas were way ahead of his time, but technology had to catch up to those ideas first. To help create technology, he conducted bigger and bigger experiments, and Nikola's high-voltage, high-frequency experiments were becoming too large and too dangerous for his New York City lab. In 1899, Nikola moved to Colorado Springs, Colorado, where he built a large laboratory. It included a gigantic Tesla coil, 52 feet in diameter. It created an enormous electrical field that allowed Nikola to light lamps many miles away without wires. In 1900s, Nikola returned to New York. He built a 187-foot high tower at his lab on Long Island in an area called Warden-Fisk. He hoped the tower would be the first to send signals and power wirelessly to anywhere in the world. Nikola's plan for Warden didn't work. In 1905, he was forced to close down his laboratory. Nikola was still only 49 years old, but after Waters closed, he seemed to disappear from the scientific community. In May 1917, though he was presented the Edison Medal, the highest honor presented by the American Institute of Electrical Engineers, in 1990, Nikola wrote the first of a series of articles for Electrical Experimenter magazine. An editor later combined the articles into a Tesla autobiography called My Inventions. Nikola continued to work on projects that interested him. In 1920, he designed a type of aircraft that could take off vertically like a helicopter, but would fly like an airplane. It was only a design, but like everything else, Nikola was certain it would work because he already had tested it in his mind. Once again, Nikola was ahead of his time. Years later, a similar aircraft was built by the U.S. military. As he got older, Nikola lived a more solitary life. He spent his days taking long walks in New York and feeding the pigeons in Bryant Park. He moved from hotel to hotel, sometimes because the maids complained about the pigeons he brought back to the room, and sometimes because he was unable to pay the bills. Finally, the Westinghouse Corporation, perhaps out of gratitude for when Nikola tore up his royalty contract many years before, agreed to pay for his room at the Hotel New Yorker. On his birthday each year, Nikola invited reporters to the hotel to talk about his new ideas and his plans. But his ideas were getting stranger and stranger. One year, he talked about a death ray machine that he believed would end all wars. Another year, he spoke about his contract with other planets. He also hinted at a major new power source he might be developing. Because his decision to tear up his royalty contract with Westinghouse cost him millions of dollars, Nikola was broke. When he died at age 86 in 1943, he was also alone. His decision to not get married meant that he had no family at his side. Even though this sounds like a very sad ending, Nikola's reputation grew after his death, and people began to honor him for his brilliance and his many scientific developments. In 1943, a U.S. Supreme Court decision confirmed that Nikola had contributed to the invention of radio. In 1960, a unit of measurement to describe the strength of a magnetic field was named the Tesla. And in 1975, Nikola was inducted into the National Inventors Halls of Fame. He was honored on a U.S. postage stamp in 1983. His face appeared on both the $5 dinar bill and the 5 million dinar bill in Yugoslavia, as well as the Siberian 100 dinar bill. Tesla coils are on display in places such as the Griffith Observatory in Los Angeles and the Museum of Science and Industry in Chicago. Tesla Inc. is a line of luxury electrical cars named in his honor. Many modern technological advances like cell phones, internets, GPS, radios, televisions, radar, and neon signs are built on Nikola's groundbreaking work and ideas. Part creative genius, part mad scientist, and completely ahead of time. Nikola Tesla made the electrical age possible. Thank you for listening. This was Jason Yu reading Who Was Nikola Tesla, Chapter 7 to Chapter 9. That was the final chapters of Who Was Nikola Tesla. I hope you like it. Subscribe and like if you want. Thank you for listening.